The mystical story of the enlightenment of the Buddha is a story that I love. It is said, of course, that the Buddha was sitting under the Bodhi tree all night long, deciding that he would not stand up from that tree until he was fully enlightened. It is said that during the night, the god of shadows called Mara showed up and threw arrows at the Buddha based upon all of the negative emotions that a soul could hold, including greed and hatred and disillusion, fear. Each one of these was an arrow that was thrown at the Buddha with the intention of detouring him from his quest for enlightenment. It is said, however, that the Buddha, having understood the challenge, would face each one of these arrows with mindfulness and with heart, was able to see each arrow, hold his heart open. And it is said that as he did so, each arrow would turn into a petal, a flower petal. And so as light was beginning to dawn in the morning, the Buddha was surrounded by flower petals. However, Mara had reserved the strongest challenge to the Buddha with his last arrow. Can you guess what that last arrow was? It was the arrow of doubt. Now, before I tell you how the Buddha faced that last arrow, basically what doubt does for us is it puts into question, who do you think you are? And this particular arrow was the most challenging for the Buddha. Basically, the arrow says, you think that you're worthy of becoming enlightened? Who do you think you are? Well, later in the message today, we'll tell you how the Buddha resolved it. And today we're going to explore how we deal with our own self-doubt. Juan Enrique Toro greeting you on this wonderful day, thanking you for the thumbs up, the wonderful subscriptions, and of course the donations. The link to those donations are found below. Now, self-doubt is universal. It seems that as we grow up and are wanting to be loved, to be accepted, to belong, sometimes we feel, practically all of us, that the love that we're receiving from our environment, our parents or whatever, just isn't enough. So we take on different personas to bring about more of that appreciation, of that love, of that consideration, of feeling like we belong. And of course, we develop different strategies. Different people develop different strategies. Some become a pleaser, trying to please parents and others into loving them. Others become intelligent. Others are hardworking. Some demonstrate that they are very responsible, and their responsibility then makes them worthy of love. All of these different techniques are basically personas that we take on to demonstrate to the world that we are worthy. The problem is, we begin to identify with that persona that we've created. It's a mask that we put on to show the world. The problem is that if the world even does get to love that persona, what happens is that the person behind the mask, our authentic self, is not receiving the love. The mask is receiving the love, the acceptance, the sense of belonging, but not us, the authentic person. We continue to believe, therefore, inside of us that somehow we're not quite worthy. We don't belong. That in essence we're bad, we're unworthy, and we're very limited in ourselves. And this is the question that is the eternal question for us. Who am I? And when we take on this persona over and over again over years, we begin to accept the fact, we surrender into it, we say to ourselves, boy, this is who I am. And we get very lonely and sad inside. Until there comes a moment in time when some light breaks into the darkness. We have some kind of experience of light. And this could be through maybe a long process of yielding to or investigating another aspect of ourselves. It could come through an experience, a book maybe. An awakening happens. Some experience that sort of jars us awake, but there's kind of an awakening. A light breaks in, and then we find ourselves at a crossroads. And the crossroads is basically a twofold path. One is to decide to continue with that persona and with that false self, or to continue to investigate this light and begin to understand who is it that is behind the mask? Who is my authentic self? It's a crossroads of identity, a very important part in which we seek to answer the question, who am I? And so on the one hand, we have ourselves, this false ego self, striving to be worthy of love, of belonging, of being enough. And the other is this authentic self that seems to be attracting us, drawing us. There's an appetite for that. And this is a classic question, of course. Who am I? Who am I? And how we answer that question can be a very personal question, because some of us come to that place, and when we are faced with this crossroads, some of us have the blessing of being able to make a quick and immediate decision in favor of that light. And we have examples of that. We see in the Bible, for example, Paul on the road to Damascus, right? He is struck by a light, and he actually goes blind until he gets to a town where his blindness is taken away and he understands who he is. The light has now penetrated the darkness, and from what we understand, he never went back to the old self. It was a very dramatic awakening that took hold. In our modern time, we have the example of Eckhart Tolle, who in a fit of profound darkness is actually about to commit suicide. And he says in his book, I was about to commit suicide when I asked myself the question, who is the me that I can't live with? Because he was saying to himself, I can't live with myself. And then suddenly, there was a voice in his head saying, who is the me that I can't live with? And that provoked his awakening. And from what we understand, he never went back to the old persona either. So some cases come in immediately and seem to hold. I think that certainly for myself, maybe for the majority of us, we're more on a path, on a journey. We're discovering more and more. We're giving more affirmation to that sense of who I am. And in the process, of course, we find ourselves not really clear as to who we are, and so we feel lost. We feel confused. We feel bewildered. And of course, this state, I believe, is a very common state for us. In fact, Dante, in his classic work, The Divine Comedy, begins, the whole book is about this journey. But he begins saying the following. He says, midway in my life's journey, I went astray from the straight road and woke to find myself alone in a dark wood. Oh, the beginning is just fantastic because it says to us, here I am, I was walking along life, minding my own business on the straight road. Everything seemed to be going fine. Maybe he was having some kind of success in life. And suddenly, something happened in which he found himself in a dark wood where the known way, where the straight way was totally lost. In other words, he was lost in the dark wood. Now, that is the classic example. And of course, I mentioned the awakening of the Buddha. Of course, he was on a journey. His awakening seemed to have happened, as a result of much of his seeking. We have also the example of Jesus in the Bible when he's tempted by the devil in the desert, says the Bible. Right? These temptations came to Jesus to basically question, who are you? And of course, I love this story in Mark. Let me read it to you. This is Mark 6, 1 through 6. He left that place and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. On the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astounded. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power have been done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James, and Joses, and Judah, and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Then Jesus said to them, "Prophets are not without honor except in their hometown, and among his own kin, and in their own house." And he could do no deed of power there, except that he laid hands on a few sick people and cured them. He was amazed at their disbelief. He was amazed at their disbelief. So here we have Jesus, who's been roaming the countryside, offering healing, teaching, doing great demonstrations. He comes to his hometown and people say, "Who do you think you are? Aren't you the carpenter's son over here? Who do you think you are with this kind of wisdom and stuff?" So we understand that even in Jesus, there might have been this questioning, which was outpictured in the people who attended that lecture. Nevertheless, if we see the Bible metaphysically, we understand that those people are the thought people within us that question our own sense of light, of the Christ, of the nature of our being. They're questioning, they're doubting. You see, doubt is such a strong emotion within us. And so the identity piece is very important within us, because the way we answer that question leads us to continue to live in self-doubt, or can lead us to freedom. That crossroad is a very important crossroad to take notice of. And for those of us who are still in the process, which, like I say, is the majority, well, what do? Like I say, self-doubt creeps in different ways for us. We have these feelings that let us know where self-doubt has crept in. Feelings like guilt and judgment, condemnation, sadness, worry, fear, anger, rage, right? Suppressed rage. We get trapped in the mind, believing that our thoughts are true. And those thoughts generate emotions, and emotions generate thoughts, and we have this vicious cycle of negativity that seems to confirm what we're believing and what we're thinking. Just like Dante, we're lost, we're bewildered, we're totally confused. And then if we have a message like the one we have today, and we can come out of the trance of that vicious cycle for just a moment, we can realize that this crossroad that we're on gives us a tremendous opportunity for practice. Practice what? Practice our identification of our authentic self, and offers us the possibility of a profound freedom. A freedom that comes with awareness. If, right, we can bring awareness to what we're thinking and to what we're feeling. The experience that awareness brings is the light. Eckhart Tolle calls it the power of now. And with that light, we can investigate it a little bit. We can sit with it. We can nurture it. We can allow it to be, so that we can see, where is this coming from? What's it all about? And what we're doing when we do that is we're beginning to adopt the observer self, the witness self. And what that does is it puts us in a point of view which is much more expansive and brings a measure of space. Of space between the thought, the feeling, the experience. We begin to say, oh my gosh, maybe that is just a thought. Maybe this is just a feeling. And if I can really be with it and investigate it and bring awareness to it, we can ultimately see that it has no power over us, because the nature of who we are is a changeless, eternal self. The soul in us is a constant, eternal presence, which does not change. And when we adopt the point of view of we are that soul, we are that image and likeness of God, we release the grip that our thoughts have, that our emotions have on our life. We see fear, we see shame and guilt, and we can discern that those were a result of some beliefs, some thoughts, and some feelings. And when we discern that, we can see that we can go beyond them. This is a powerful, powerful recognition. Because when we see that they have no power and that we can go beyond them, we're going to understand that we can overcome our suffering. In fact, we could say that if we are experiencing suffering of any kind, mental, emotional, even physical, psychosomatic medicine is all about the relationship between the mind and the body, in which if the mind is trying to protect us from feeling the deepest and darkest emotions, what it'll do is it'll throw the pain to a body part. And it'll really feel and experience like a painful bodily experience, but it's a result of the mind trying to protect us from some very negative emotions. And the cure for psychosomatic illness is awareness, attention, presence, observing. And so if you are suffering, okay, if you're suffering in one way or another, you're believing in something that is not true. Let me repeat that. If you're experiencing suffering, you are believing in something that is not ultimately true. Now, it feels very real. I'm not going to deny the experience of it. But we need to understand that it is a result of some limiting beliefs that are squeezing us, that are causing this within us. Beliefs, thoughts, emotions are very powerful inside of us. If we don't understand that, we're going to go looking for causation. We're going to look for relief. We're going to look for a way out. And what we'll do is we'll decide, well, I'm going to decide once and for all that I am bad. Or I'm going to decide that you're bad, or somebody else is bad, or the world is bad. Or most of us choose both. Both I'm bad and the world is bad. And this leads to an inner war, an inner conflict, and a conflict and separation with our brothers and sisters, because we begin to blame them for the situation that we're living. Listen to what the Saint Hildegard says. Hildegard says, we cannot live in a world that is not our own, in a world that is interpreted for us by others. An interpreted world is not a home. Part of the terror is to take back our own listening, to use our own voice, to see our own light. And I love this part of the terror, because it is scary. We're in that crossroads. We're going to leave an identification with something that we've carried and said yes to for a long time in favor of something unknown, unfully explored, unrealized. Or deciding in favor of that, but it is our own voice. It is our own listening. And it is our own light. And of course it provokes some fear because of the unknown. But it's authentic. It's who we are. And this is a powerful expression. And so let's explore, how do we do this? Well, illusion, of course, beliefs, like I said, are very powerful. And they will exist. They will continue to exist until they're investigated. Let me repeat that. Beliefs are very powerful. Illusion, right? Very powerful until they're investigated. So we need to be willing to bring some awareness, mindfulness, light into whatever is going on within us. We need to be willing to investigate. Some of you know that I work as a chaplain in a long-term care facility. This week I met with a woman who was having a very hard time, and she was beginning to tell me her story. She's got cancer and undergoing chemotherapy. But the reason for her sadness was not so much the chemotherapy. She complained about losing her hair and so forth. Her real pain right now was that her family decided that they would move back to the Dominican Republic and leave her here in the United States. Now, she understood the reasons why they were doing it. In fact, she didn't disagree with them. She thought that what they were doing was the right thing. But as we explored the feelings that she had around that, she confessed. She says, well, I'm all alone. I feel like I don't belong anymore. I feel like I don't matter. I have a lot of fear of being just totally alone. That I don't matter to anyone. I have no purpose. All I have is silence, right? And emptiness. And I encouraged her to go ahead and express all of that and to be with it. And she finally confessed to me. She says, if I had a magic pill, I would take it and just be done with all of this. She was talking about suicide. Well, but immediately she corrected herself. Oh God, I didn't want to say that. She felt guilty about having admitted that. Right away she wanted to correct it. But I encourage her to stay with that feeling. No meaning, no purpose, no belonging. I don't matter to anybody. I'm not worthy. Nobody loves me. I don't belong. I'm all alone. We continue to explore that. And finally, I asked her the question, could you imagine yourself living without that belief, of all those emotions? Could you, just for a moment, imagine that you didn't think or believe that? What I was trying to do was bring in a little light into this illusion, right? And she was taken back a little bit, and she says, well, I could imagine. And right there, that's the crossroads. That's where you're going to decide if you're going to continue with this persona that's suffering, that's lonely, that doesn't belong, that doesn't matter to anybody, or if you're going to choose in favor of the light. That is standing at the crossroads. And of course, in that crossroads, she knows what the light of God in her life is. She's touched that before. She's a person of prayer. She also understands the darkness. And I said, well, who would you be if you didn't believe all of that? She was kind of taken aback, but began to kind of play along with me because it was kind of a game. She says, well, if I didn't believe that, well, I'd have more space and there'd be no reason for me to be sad or lonely or worried. She says, I'd relax. And I could believe that I do matter and that, that I'm loved. And then she said something profound. She said, I could trust God with my soul. I could trust God with my soul. You remember the words of Jesus on the cross. Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. powerful words of surrender. Wow. And she actually got to that place because she was willing to bring in some light into that illusion, into that suffering. There was more space. Suddenly she can breathe. So remember the Buddha under the Bodhi tree? Mara, the shadow god, throwing his last arrow at him. The strongest arrow, the most difficult one. The Buddha sees doubt coming at him. Now in the past what he'd done is he'd seen, the attack of all of the other emotions, aware of them, just like we're talking about, bringing light in, allowing them to be, that's part of me. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to put it down, repress it. Yes, all of these emotions are in me. And then comes this arrow, doubt. Who do you think you are? Now, even though the Buddha had success with the others, he felt that he wasn't empowered enough by himself to take on that question. And it is said that at that moment, he put his hand on the earth. And he called upon Mother Earth to give him the energy to hold the awareness that doubt had no power over him. He was at the crossroads with that arrow of doubt. He decided to take the path of light, to embrace the larger truth. And it is said that by taking on the power of Mother Earth, that arrow of doubt too was transformed into a flower petal. Now friends, we don't stand at the crossroads once in our life. We stand at the crossroads time and time again. It seems to be, at least for me, an eternal question. Who am I? And I'm constantly deciding which way. One leads to further self-doubt, to more suffering. The other leads to freedom. I hope with today's idea that you can bring some awareness to what's happening. Realize where you are emotionally. What thoughts are you thinking? Reflect and observe yourself. Allow, accept all of these emotions to be in you. Investigate them, kind of like I did with that woman. Investigate it. What is that? Maybe come to the point where you can say, is it true? What would I be like if this wasn't happening in me? Some space opens up. And in that space we can nurture with love all aspects of ourselves. And just like the Buddha, find our own freedom. Juan Enrique Toro greeting you on this wonderful day, thanking you for tuning in, for the thumbs up, for the likes, for the subscriptions, and of course those wonderful donations. Thank you, God, and thank you to all of you. Reminding you today and always, life is consciousness, and consciousness is life.